Kathleen Kennedy. It is a name that sends shivers up the spines of so many fans of so many franchises. Star Wars, destroyed. Indiana Jones, eviscerated. Willow, wiped out. Is there anything safe from this woman except coffee? And yet, she is still there. But despite so many times of hearing, Kathleen Kennedy is gone, Kathleen Kennedy is leaving, and fans getting the little boy who cried wolf syndrome, we're here now to tell you it's real. And folks, explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of the culture curve. It's what we do each and every day here on the WDW Pro channel. Holy smokes, look at the panel. I guess this is kind of a big deal. We're going to get into it right now. As we do, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about the notification bell. We have Lauren Connor, we have Mexican Iron Man, Culture Casino, X-Wing, Views with Hughes, Floral from Under a Rock, and the illustrious Martin Stone, all here with us today. Now, Mike, you are sort of the leader of this one. We were on the Renegade Online show on Sunday. We were discussing what I had covered live when we got the news that Kathleen Kennedy was entering the theater for the Indiana Jones premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. We knew that it was odd that Disney was simultaneously releasing extremely negative news about Kathleen Kennedy, Star Wars, Lucasfilm, etc. They could have released at any time that the Galactic Star Cruiser was being shut down. They could have released it on a Friday night. They could have released it on a Saturday, a Sunday evening. Those typical news dumps when you want to hide something. They did not. I don't think it was just some sort of marketing intern who really screwed up here. But as she was going into the theater, at the same time, they released that information. Now we know, by the way, that the Galactic Star Cruiser was losing so much money that it is better as a tax write-down. Better as a tax write-down than as an opening establishment. Now, it doesn't stop there. As Kathleen Kennedy was leaving, and let's remind the folks out there that this was supposed to be her big night. And indeed, CEO Robert Iger went to the Cannes premiere, the first time that he had ever gone to the festival, if you can believe it. But he's there with Kathleen Kennedy, partying it up. As she leaves the theater, Disney gets her another whammy. And that second whammy was that Willow also is better eliminated from Disney Plus as a tax write-down than it is as actual content. This essentially ruined her night. Instead of getting to ask fun questions and answer fun questions about Indiana Jones, she was instead volleying these kinds of questions at her. And then there was also the reviews. Bob Iger had to have known that Indiana Jones was going to be a disaster. He is no fool, even if we disagree with many of his decisions. And yet, he opted to go with this idea of sending Indy to Cannes, where it is now going to be 5 weeks of a rotten score of people talking about how bad this movie is. When you have a terrible movie and it's one of the most expensive of all time, you would typically embargo that sucker until the day before. In this case, it is egg on the face. It is a rotten tomato on the face of everybody involved. And Kathleen Kennedy has embarrassed Hollywood royalty. My theory at the time, Mike, was that, and this was live, I was doing the live show as this was happening. My theory then was that this was planned, that Bob Iger was there to try to coddle Kennedy, smooth things over, have a good time, let her have her fun. Whether or not the movie is terrible, go ahead, go to Cannes, give her the night that she's wanted for so long with her people, not Star Wars Celebration stinky people like she believes, but rather with the uppity ups, the elite, the cinephiles of the world. And then at the same time, hit her with all this bad news to kind of say, it's over. You do need to step aside. We were talking about this on the Renegade Online show later on Sunday night. And Mike, you said that you had heard something in this regard. Now, you and I have not spoken. I don't know exactly what you heard. And I have talked to 2 additional sources today to try to run this down. But Mike, share with us now what it is that you know, and then we'll get everybody's opinion, and I'll share what I know, and we'll see where this goes.
So I went to school with somebody that works in Burbank, and I can't disclose who it is. I can say that they're in the area of finance and accounting. And I can say that this person is not a YouTuber and not connected with any of the YouTube personalities, including yourself, Pro. I know for a fact. I do know that they know I'm on YouTube, and in the past, they've told me things, and I've always kept them to myself. I don't regard myself as a YouTuber. I don't regard myself as a rumor guy. I don't regard myself. And so I've kept a lot to myself over the last 2.5 years, and I've been told a few major things. I won't go into the whole list, but as an example, this is someone that told me Bob Chapek, I think this was February, March of last year, had about 6 months. That was the talk that he had 6 months. And as we know, he got walked out the door in November.
And that's a heck of a thing too for you to know and not report on.
He told me that. He told me that right around my birthday last year, February.
Yeah, it speaks to your integrity that you would hold on to that and protect a source and not want to be involved in sort of the speculation that goes on.
But this time he told me I could repeat. He told me when I can repeat it, and I've just usually held to hold it in various things. And there's probably been about a half dozen every single time this guy's been right. And so this time, though, I was watching your videos with great interest this week, as well as other things that I've seen on social media from other people. And what I told you backstage, and then I said it on air, is that he told me two things. One is that the decision to close the hotel was made fully known that it would probably make Kathleen Kennedy look bad.
It did. Absolutely.
It was fully known that it would make Lucasfilm end her look, but they did it anyways. Number two is that that Monday today was going to be a tough day for Lucasfilm. Now, I was supposed to call him back today and get more details on that, but I haven't had a chance to because I've had family visiting from out of town, and I literally just walked in the door right before recording this with you. But the reason he reached out to me is because he does watch various channels that I'm on and YouTubers that I follow, and I was told this specifically in order to basically share and say that these theories are right, that at least there is something about the discussion of no longer protecting KK or Lucasfilm specifically. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that he made the comment to me that not enough attention is being given by all of us. And I don't mean all of us specifically on this panel, just all of us and all of us commentators in general, about the organization chart of Disney. He says, you guys don't realize that Kathleen Kennedy isn't even on the executive team or the leadership team for Disney.
Right.
And because she isn't. She runs a studio for Lucasfilm. But if you look at the actual org chart, which I could bring up, or we could bring it up later with Jonas and clip it into this video, he'd made that comment before. It's not, it's fascinating to me. And I asked him, I said, why are you telling me this now? And he says, because things are really heated about the lack of performance of Lucasfilm. And he meant that financially because he's a finance guy. So that's all I was told. That's it. You can ask me any questions. We can go around the horn. But the reason I would keep this to myself, but I just, I asked him point blank, can I share this? And he said, absolutely. And so I shared it with you live last night. And I've shared it with a couple of people since.
So there have been many times from many commentators that the audience out there has heard Kathleen Kennedy is gone. She's done it this time. She's went too far, et cetera, et cetera. She never goes away. She's like a Dave Filoni character. She just never, ever leaves. I do feel this time is different, and I have never reported that Kathleen Kennedy is leaving, ever.
Right.
And I've been doing this for 6 or 7 years.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you a couple of things about this, and then I do want to get everybody's opinion. First of all, they humiliated Kathleen Kennedy on her big night. And they did it while Bob Iger was side by side with her. There's something to be said about that. And she really was. I mean, there was no reason for Disney to release that information when they did. When we're talking about the performance of Lucasfilm, there have been some things that have occurred in the last little while that I think are damning to her. Truly damning. I mean, it's one thing for Star Wars to be damaged. It's one thing for all of us to claim, you've killed Star Wars, you've done it this time. But the gatekeepers, the intelligentsia, they always say, oh, no, Star Wars is way bigger than these rubes, than these flyover country people, whatever. But there are some things that are not avoidable from the company any longer. Now, number one, Mike, You and I, and Jonas had it. I mean, Jonas brought this up. Disney is low on cash right now. At least that's what we believe. Disney's in a much different place than it was any time before, and that's not fully being reported around the media yet. Disney needs to buy Hulu, and Disney needs to get money. They can't afford to have somebody pulling their entire studio down like Kathleen Kennedy has. And here are the things that have happened recently. One, Star Wars Celebration had viewership that was described to me as pitiful. I was told that Star Wars Celebration, and I believe this is true, Star Wars Celebration had less viewership than some big YouTube channels. That's a big problem. Another thing is, if we look at this last quarter on Disney Plus, North America lost 300,000 subscribers, and it did so as The Mandalorian came back. Who is the orchestrator of everything falling apart with The Mandalorian? Well, it's Kathleen Kennedy. It has to be. Whatever you think about how Gina Carano was let go, whatever you think about the remapping of all of this, Kathleen Kennedy, the buck stops with her. Then you've also got the Galactic Star Cruiser closing. You have the fact that Willow is so terrible that they wiped it off Disney Plus in this short amount of time. She's got 3 movies coming up. Indiana Jones now looks like it could lose $200 million. Imagine that, a movie coming out with Harrison Ford in his swan song this bad. And I think Disney is looking at that and saying, can we afford 3 more of those? Can we afford 3 more of those? And I don't think that they have an answer to that. Before we get into what I have heard today, I just want to go around. I want to start with Lorne, and then we'll make our way around. We're like the Brady Bunch today. Okay, I'm sitting here in the middle, but we'll go around and we'll see what everybody thinks about what we've got so far. Lorne, have we actually reached the point where it's so bad, it's critical mass, Kathleen Kennedy can't stay?
Possibly. I mean, the conversation that's been going around about the fact that they are in such a cash-poor position for reserves, I think, is very interesting. Reality has to reassert itself at a certain point. And if our estimates are true that they're losing as much money each quarter that it would cover a cruise ship, there's only so many cruise ships that you can drop. And if they need money, like it sounds like they need money to be able to go through with the Hulu acquisition and try and merge that with the Disney app and try and obscure some of their numbers and losses and things, then they're in a bad position. Now, in one of the videos that we did earlier this week, one of the things that I said was there's a certain point at which you have to ask, what is the value of Lucasfilm anymore? If they're not producing Star Wars movies, and if they're not able to produce Indiana Jones movies after this one, if they're not going to recast the character, their IP is essentially worthless at that point. The only thing you've got left is ILM. ILM used to be the standard bearer for visual effects in Hollywood. They did lots of effects for just about every studio under the sun. But there are lots of other effects houses now. Weta is one that I could bring up that does excellent work. So if you're not the standard bearer anymore, you start to have to ask, what are all of these employees at this studio? What value are they providing to me? I think that also kind of goes to what Mike was saying about the fact that Kathleen Kennedy's not on the Disney org chart. That's not a surprise. I don't think that I mean, I don't know if anybody else here thought that she was on the Disney org chart. She's the head of a studio. It's a valuable studio. It has a lot of value, but it's just one studio. They also have Pixar, which is in trouble. They've got Disney Animation. They've got all these other properties. It's just another studio, and it's provided nothing valuable in almost 10 years. So at a certain point, somebody's got to be held responsible for that.
X-Wing. Kathleen Kennedy leaves, it does not fix everything. And that's something that everybody needs to get in their heads. It will be decided by who comes in to replace her if she leaves. But then also, that person has to clean out a hive of toxicity. Should anybody even get excited at this point?
So that's something I've been talking about for a long time, and I love that you kind of brought that up about the org chart. Kathleen Kennedy, we all love to point the finger at KK, and if she's just gone, everything gets fixed. But the bottom line is that's just not what happens. There's a lot of issues at Lucasfilm itself, but also in the Disney company as a whole. So if we really think that Kathleen Kennedy is going to be marched out the door and they're going to put some guy in there who knows exactly what he's doing and bring back the fan base and fix the parks and do all that different stuff in a basically like a negative cash flow business right now, I find that really hard to believe. So what does this fix? we're not going to know until she's gone and we start seeing what they're doing when somebody else comes in. But the bottom line is, whoever it is, they need to pay attention to the fans a little more. And if this is anything for me, it's justification, because there are hundreds of people who have been saying, you know, it's these toxic Star Wars fans. They're outdated. Lots of people love the sequel trilogy. This is proven financial evidence that that is factually untrue.
The Galactic Star Cruiser can't stay open. I mean, that's how bad it is. Now, Culture, take a look at this tweet. This out of Variety. This came out a few days ago. This came out when we were doing the live show on the Cannes Film Festival. And they have attempted in many places to kind of walk this back, but it's too late. Variety said of the screening, and remember that this is where the people who love movies the most, they're gathered together. They're gathered together, and they revere people like Kathleen Kennedy. They revere Lucasfilm. They revere the ideas behind what we've seen with Star Wars, Indy, and all these others. They're in favor of it. And yet Variety says the elaborate action scenes and witty one-liners delivered by Phoebe Waller-Bridge in Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny mostly received a muted response inside the theater. Notice they're focusing on her. That's the initial reaction. Audience members, again, we're talking about the people who love these films the most, the least likely to do this. Audience members could be heard whispering out of boredom in French. Culture. This can't go on. And my thought on this is that perhaps Kathleen Kennedy has finally committed an unforgivable Hollywood sin.
Well, yes, I mean, beyond that, I mean, she's fallen not only out of favor with those around her and the people that have backed her, but obviously with the studio that she operates, or in the wholly owned. She's a wholly owned subsidiary. So Lucasfilm has reached something that Jim Collins talked about in his book How the Mighty Fall. They've reached a point where they've stepped into stage 4, which is grasping for salvation. And they've gone through the previous 3 steps just in her interim leadership of this company from the time that she took over from George. I don't think this can continue much longer. I think that, you know, at some point, as was pointed out earlier, you can't lose a cruise ship every quarter. And if the opportunity to write down $300 million or write off $300 million over the next 2 quarters is more appealing than keeping something open that was one of her love children, then it makes perfect sense to, well, you know, maybe throw her out the door as well. I don't think it'll be done in a fashion that's, you know, unbecoming. I think that they'll essentially let her go in a nice way and start giving her lifetime achievement awards here and there, as they normally do when they let people go. But look, it's been time for a long time, and that's one of the reasons why you've heard these rumors for so long that she was going to leave. Maybe now we've finally arrived on the doorstep of that moment.
Well, I think we are there. Of course, they're not going to do anything to her while we've got the Indiana Jones. Right. As we're rolling that out, that does nothing but damage the film. They've got plenty of fires they're trying to put out, whether that's The Little Mermaid, Elemental, etc. They have so many issues right now that they can't keep up. Martin, a question for you is, so Kathleen Kennedy, I'm with Culture on this. I think she'll actually probably get some sort of legacy position, right? She'll become a consultant somewhere at Disney. She'll get executive producer rights. She'll go to all the parties. She'll get all the awards. So, Martin, where do you think this goes then? What could someone who comes into Lucasfilm do to try to fix Star Wars?
You know, has anybody ever fixed something like this before? I mean, Walt did it.
Terry Matalas.
Okay, Terry Matalas, but that was 2 bad seasons of a TV show, and he maybe fixed it with a 3rd. This is a decade of movies that large swaths of a fan base have rejected, and at the same time have felt slighted. Like, you know, Disney has faced financial ruin a couple of times. They've pulled themselves out of it by, you know, re-releasing the classics like Cinderella. World War II saved them because they were about to collapse, and turning the studios over to the army to make training films, pulled them through some stuff. This, though, they've taken one of the most beloved and iconic brands and divided a fan base. What can somebody do who steps in here? I mean, they can clean house, they can restructure the organization, but to produce a brand new Star Wars movie that everybody's going to get behind, how long is that going to take? 2.5 years, 3 years, even if they're moving at light speed?
Well, I think the Rey movie is still on the way. I mean, I think that whoever comes in, we're still going to get the Rey movie. I don't see any way out of getting the Mandoverse movie.
Mm-hmm.
Flora, let's hand it to you. What do you think can happen here in terms of, I mean, how quickly can they start to repair it?
How quickly? I think generally, we saw how people came back, kind of go back to the Terry Matalas thing. Like, Star Trek is such a small fan base compared to Star Wars, right? And so that's kind of a good little sample size. People came back fairly quickly with something that was more in line with. And I think that if you had something that was actually Star Wars, they could shift it pretty quick within 3 to 5 years if they had the right people on the right teams in the right places. I think that because people want it. It's the same thing with Marvel. It's the same thing with Pixar. If you have the things that everyone actually loved before and you just like put it in front of them, and it's not just fan baiting, you'll get a lot more out of it, and people will respond quicker. And you just don't try to bring in your old stuff. You just say, like, you know what, let's do Star Wars in a whole other time period, right? Like, you just go into the future or go to a time in the past when no one knows anything about and just build something fresh. Have it about the Jedi, boys, girls, alien, I don't care, right? But you do something where it's like, this is Star Wars. This is Marvel.
The High Republic, baby.
Yeah, and you don't do that, right? So, and that's where like you look at what have we done? Let's do the exact opposite. like that's literally what they have to do, is ask that question. What have we done? Now let's do the exact opposite. And what do we want to do? Let's do the exact opposite. And I think they'll get a lot more traction faster. They're going to appeal to a broader fan base because, like, obviously it's not working. And it's been said a bunch of times where we've created and allowed for the excuse that big businesses are like big boats and it takes a long time to turn these things. And I'm like, I don't know. Like if you see how quickly Disney has shifted in the past, right, with the Renaissance in the late 80s, early 90s, like they could do it. They could do it tomorrow. It's just they don't have anyone that actually wants to.
They don't actually have to release a movie to start fixing things. You can actually do ancillary products. You can start doing the groundwork ahead of time to signal that things are changing.
Absolutely. And just one quick question, just I guess for Mike, is so is Kevin Feige or Jim Morris, are they actually on the executive leadership? Or
Kevin Feige is part of the same group of 30 some odd executives that report to the hold on, let me bring it up.
Alan Bergman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, because I just thought that maybe it'd be worth comparing, contrasting, because we hear that Kathleen's not on these teams, but if those guys are, then that does actually speak volumes.
Well,
I think she's always felt slighted about that. Go ahead, Jonas.
I agree with you, Pro. I completely agree with you that that's a problem. In fact, further evidence of her narcissism is evidence to me when you look at the Lucasfilm org chart, which has her as basically, I think she's got like either 32 or 35 direct reports, which is a bicycle wheel of management, which any organization that ever tries to function like this, over and over.
She's basically
it's a narcissistic.
She's basically
it's a
driven.
narcissist. The bicycle wheel org chart, which is like one person, you got 35 direct reports. When you turn it on its side, it looks like a bicycle wheel because everything has to go through one person. Those organizations, Jonas, I'm sure you can back me up on this from a corporate standpoint, are always dysfunctional 100% of the time, right?
The only time that it ever works is when it's an owner who is disengaged, who has fully competent staff that doesn't have to function with their input. And even then, it's still a disaster when those people start disagreeing with each other.
Well, let's ponder something real quick. And Hughes, I'm interested in your take on this. Think about the number of directors, the number of writers who have come into Lucasfilm to work on Star Wars, Indiana Jones, etc., who, when they leave, their reputation is greatly damaged, either because they were fired and they were fired in such an awful way, or because the product they created was far below anything that they've ever produced before or after. I mean, look at James Mangold. Everybody thought he was on the climb after Logan. And now with this Indiana Jones film, I mean, this is going to be roundly mocked. Hughes, what do you think?
Well, first and foremost, Logan sucked because of the fact the kind of ending that they gave Wolverine and everything. And why? Just why? I'd rather go with the comic book rendition of him when the adamantium is all over him. He dies from that. And secondly, it doesn't matter how many writers and directors and stuff. They're all just going. They just find somebody that's just going to fall in tune with the agenda that they're trying to put out there, point blank. And it's like, if you're not willing to go by this agenda, put it out there, and then entertain secondly, then you're gone. All right. And as far as I'm concerned with the whole Kathleen Kennedy situation, it just feels like, and I don't mean to bring any sports references into this, but like you're watching the Cowboys game. For those of you who are Dallas Cowboys fans, I'm sorry, but I got to use y'all as this analogy. They give you hopes for another Super Bowl, getting a lot of wins this season. Until the playoffs, boom, you get sent home by the 49ers the second year in a row. Then you're a Yankees fan. Go Yankees. I'm a Yankees fan myself. You get promise of a number 28 ring until boom, you get swept by the Houston Astros once again. Same analogy with these, you get with also Star Wars, because you get boosted up with the rumors that Kathleen Kennedy is leaving. You get boosted up with other rumors about how different projects are going to fail. Next thing you know, boom, Star Wars Celebration in Europe this year. You get a rendition of not only the fact that a failed Mandalorian season 3, where they're killing off the character based on Jon Favreau, but you're also getting more news about them leading it into the High Republic.
Exactly. Well said. And let me say this too. I was actually the first out there to report, and we had Lauren on in that video. We had Echo Base Network there talking about that. Indeed, the Rey movie was coming, and that Daisy Ridley would be at Star Wars Celebration. So for those of you out there who are feeling pretty skeptical about Kathleen Kennedy, I hear you. I understand why. You're shell-shocked at this point. We've all got PTSD from this lady, but I do think at this point, I think at this point she's ready to go. Let me tell you why. Here's the two things. Then I'm going to hand it over to all of you. You just take it away. You just have the conversation. Yes.
I think Jonas had something.
He did.
Jonas, what do you got?
Well, I got two things to say. Kathleen Kennedy, in her situation in the org chart, is similar to that of Pixar and the Disney Animation Studio right now.
They're held in high esteem.
Right. They're messed up. Jim Morris and Pete Docter run Pixar right now, and Pete Docter's a great director. I don't know. It doesn't seem like he's a great CCO, and
not a good communicator.
Walt Disney Animation is Clark Spencer and Jennifer Lee. Jennifer Lee seems to, again, be a competent creative, married to Alfred Molina, by the way. I hope she does well in her next film. So these aspects of the company that should be creative focus are all silos. And I think Feige's bigger than everybody else, because he's got that urge to succeed, and he wants to be bigger. I think if Lucasfilm wants to repair right now, do you know what they do? First of all, you got to tell everybody they're firing Kathleen Kennedy. That's job one. They're not going to put it in those terms, but yes. Right. She has to ride off into the sunset, but they have to have someone take the reins that has George Lucas approval, whether that's Jon Favreau, which is a big ask at this point, because I think she's largely ran him away. I think you're right. The closest I can think that they have in-house that wouldn't make everyone angry is probably Doug Chiang, who is not the kind of guy who should run an entire studio, but he's at least got the pedigree.
Yeah, he knows Star Wars at the very least.
Jonas, I want to agree. I mean, but what you do is you do what works classically at Disney across the board and always has. You bring in more than one person to do that. You bring in an executive who's an executive. You bring in a creative that's a creative. It's it's back to those two key positions, and maybe a third creative mind, like a third person that's a creative mind. But that's how it's always worked there. Every time they've rescued the company as a whole, that's what's happened. I can reference
the Roy and Walt dynamic.
Right. Ed Catmull and John Lasseter were the reason that they let Pixar continue to do its thing. Obviously, the Pixar quality, we've all agreed, diminished a little bit at that point, and Walt Disney Animation went way up when Lasseter became the chief creative officer of the entire company. And they were obviously grooming him as the quote unquote next Walt Disney. Whether or not that meant the next Walt Disney Company CEO is a completely different issue. And that maybe is why he's gone in reality. I think what you do is you do a bunch of fan steps, like, I don't know, maybe releasing the original trilogy in its original form on Blu-ray or 4K, or releasing The Mandalorian on physical media, which I would say that would be crazy if Disney Plus were doing well, but it's obviously not.
Well, gentlemen, I don't want to constrain this conversation. Let me throw in these two pieces for the audience, and then you guys go at it. And we'll just do this naturally. We don't have to go around or anything or be formal in any way. Here's the two things that I've heard that are important to know, and why we're willing to do a video like this with the type of thumbnail and the type of title we've got. First of all, you've got Mike with a source that I don't know. I've never come into contact with. You've got the optics of what they did with the Cannes Film Festival and bringing that out when they did. Literally, I mean, go look at the timestamps. People can go research this on their own. Literally as she enters, literally as she leaves. I've got two sources. One of these sources that I've talked to today says that, and you can see this actually starting to bear itself out in the press, but you can start to see that there's a serious issue between the Parks division now and Lucasfilm. And earlier this morning, they were telling me that Josh D'Amaro has been put in a really bad situation here. He's got to defend his Disney parks. He's got to convince guests that everything is okay, while at the same time they're closing down this Star Cruiser. And it's causing the situation where morale is terrible at Disney World with cast members. They blame Lucasfilm for this. Lucasfilm blames the parks. You get the idea. Then that started to bear itself out. As I said, you can go look. I think it was J.P. Morgan, that there's a convention where D'Amaro spoke out. He is the head of Disney Parks and was not defensive towards Star Wars, but rather was defensive towards the parks themselves. And then the second thing, which is vital to understand, is that I had a source that I trust, but I can't verify this one at all. But they say that Kathleen Kennedy's contract comes to an end next year. Now, that would typically mean that you would have contractual negotiations if she goes forward next year. I am now told that, according to the source, and again, I cannot verify it, but that they now have meetings planned for this August. That's where I'll stop. Let me hand it to all of you. Take it away. Lauren, you had some thoughts.
Well, I was kind of piggybacking on Jonas's thoughts about what can be done to try and help rescue the brand. Here's one thing. Back before Lucasfilm got sold to Disney, they had produced one of Lucas's original first draft scripts of the Star Wars by Dark Horse Comics. They had adapted those scripts with some artwork that looked like that. Do that with his episodes 7, 8, and 9 script treatments. I don't think they were probably fully developed. There was not a full script there, but we do know that it was going to involve some of the stuff surrounding the midichlorians, the Wills, supposedly Darth Maul and Darth Talon. Those are popular characters. Somebody could develop that into some type of a script and produce it in like a comic book form. Doesn't have to be official. Could be like an Elseworlds thing, but it would satisfy people's hunger for something that George approved of, and he could have input on it. Other than that, I think obviously Kathleen has to go. I agree she's not responsible for all of this, but you have to get the message across that we understand this is damaged. Now Disney has to think about, what do we want to do with Star Wars? It's damaged. You have to rehabilitate it somehow if you want it to be an ongoing concern. So that's the next question is Star Wars an ongoing concern? Is it something that they think can be revived and go into the future? I would have said, even 6 months ago, yeah, it could be revived. I don't know if it can be now. It is so damaged, I do not know that it can be repaired. So I think that's the first critical question is, does ILM survive? Does Lucasfilm survive? If the answer is yes, you've got to produce something, and it's got to be of a much different quality than what they've been putting out now. They can afford no more misses.
They can't keep making willows. That inspires zero confidence.
I want to go back to the Chase thing because I caught your video earlier when you were when that was discussed, and I read that.
Yeah, go for it.
That is huge because essentially the reason why that gentleman is so important in all of Walt Disney World is because his division undoubtedly is what's making all the cash.
Yeah, it kept the company afloat for the past years.
Yes. Not only has it kept the company afloat, it generates the most operating cash and it generates the most net profit. There's no other comparison of any other division or any subunit, either in real dollars or as a percentage of the dollars or in net cash that can even compete. The fact that he was the one engaging with Chase, who was a major financial partner.
Okay, Mike, let me give you a quote from him. Now, I don't have it in front of me. I'm doing this paraphrasing. I think this is key, though. When asked why the Star Cruiser was closing at the time that it is, his response was a change in leadership, which indicates to me that Iger wanted the Star Cruiser closed.
Yeah.
We know that Iger does not like Kathleen Kennedy, even if he's at the Cannes Film Festival. In his autobiography, he thanks everybody on planet Earth. I think I'm in there somewhere. And he gave Kathleen Kennedy half a sentence.
Eisner has a glowing review in that book.
Right.
Which says something.
Well,
so
it does
I
say
early on, and Culture can back me up on this. On one of the Meet or Midnight's Edge in the morning shows, when some of the stuff started breaking, I immediately jumped to the tax benefit before this guy got on stage and talked about it. And what this company has to do is it has to create as many tax deductions as possible to protect the operating cash that is being generated by this division. I heard Jonas in one of your other videos, Pro. You guys got into it a little bit, but basically what's happening.
I don't like that guy. I'll tell you.
He's a weirdo.
Yeah, he is. Jonas?
That Jonas guy.
I love Jonas. Jonas is like my twinsy.
That's right.
I mean, literally, like we finish each other's sentences when we're offline. It's really weird.
Love it.
But that cash that he's generating, so that we don't have a taxable impact, we've got to if I was on that team, we need to generate losses, and that's why when this guy reached out to me, all of the things just made sense. All the things are starting to triangulate now. Because let's face facts. I think if I'm inside the parks people, now I'm going to cross the line into conjecture. I know for a fact the economic impact, as Jonas talked about on your previous video, everybody go watch the video, was correct in terms of the calculations. And if I were on the finance team, I would be generating as much deductions as I can to protect that cash by September 30th, which is when the fiscal year ends. Now, I'm going to take a leap here and say that when he told me that something was going to be interesting on Monday, I'm not surprised to hear that you've heard that there's fingers being pointed, because let's face facts. If and this is a conjecture, not a fact, but I think it's a fact. If I'm inside the parks division, I'm going to be like, look, we generally make money here, over here in parks and stuff.
Unlike you guys do.
Unlike you movie studio morons that burn cash and lose cash, we actually make money here.
Yeah.
All right. Over here in parks and experiences, we make money and we know how to manage our crap.
And I need to add to that. Yeah. Go ahead, Culture.
Because we manage our crap, and we not only subsidize your crap, the one time that our Imagineers, that our creative team, and our vision of our direction wanted to do something a certain way, the one time we said, okay, you guys come in with your vision and do it your way. Guess what? We had to close $1 billion hotel. So because we're fiscally responsible, Chase, we're going to do the responsible thing, and we're going to generate a $300 million tax credit right now, and we're going to turn this money loser into a tax saver and hold on to the cash, because over here in parks and experiences, we make money.
But
Culture?
Mikey, Mikey, no, but see, you bring up a great point, because Josh he's going to be the next guy. This is how they normally do it at Disney. It's usually the guy that goes through the parks, products, and experiences that makes their way up to the big chair. That's how it normally plays out, and you usually get that happening in that direction, or at least that's kind of the idea of why they're bringing this guy along. But you're 100% right. It's the division that rakes in the cash. And look, he backed off big time and didn't point a finger at Florida directly. He said, we're still going to spend $17 billion in Florida over the course of the next decade.
Which, by the way, folks, is not an impressive number.
No.
I know that's bandied about, but it's 1.7 each year on average. And if you think, well, they might build a hotel at some point, that'll take up some money. Well, they might do a new ride at each one of their 4 parks on occasion.
Well,
it starts to add up where you're like, oh, wait, this is just normal.
Yeah, it is. It's essentially it's an attraction and something ancillary. That's all that is every year. So if they bring along an attraction or fully rehab something or recreate something, that's $1 billion. You just, that's what it costs to do a Galaxy's Edge land. It's what it costs to do Pandora. It's $1 billion. So if you
make an Indiana Jones movie, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. But like I said, I mean, this guy Josh is the money right now. It's not Feige and Marvel. It's not, and it's none of the products that go along with it. This is
starting to not be Dana Walden.
Yeah, exactly. But, wow.
Can I just point something out? It's not going to be prolonged, but the question is, who's the advertisement for the parks, right? And I think that's something to consider, right? So when the parks are looking at Lucasfilm, being like, we're not generating any cash. There's a reason why. It's because their commercials that are supposed to be about 2 hours long really suck.
Yeah.
Right? So,
well, think about this. X-Wing. Universal Studios is getting Harry Potter, or they've got Harry Potter. They're going to add some more. They've got Mario. We know, I mean, I haven't even had a chance to do the video on this, but we know that a Zelda expansion is coming to Islands of Adventure, and it's huge. It's a massive expansion. Yeah. Universal Studios is literally opening an entirely new theme park that's the biggest theme park in North America. Plus, they're adding new lands. Disney is canceling, bringing Imagineers over and saying, well, it's mean old Florida. DeSantis is being mean to us. And no, it's because you don't have the cash. You're like an addict digging through the couch.
Yeah.
You're under your car seat trying to find a penny.
I'm sorry, that was a Homer Simpson's reference, and Homer is currently in the theme park land owned by Universal Studios right now.
That's right, Disney owning it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so the thing you have to think about, too, that Universal is doing, which is kind of incredible, is that when they use those IPs, they use everything from the IP. It's incredible. It's not just one small thing that they created that, coincidentally, nobody likes, but they don't ignore the rest of the franchise completely. So when we talk about sitting down and starting to fix things, I mean, I don't know where Lucasfilm has a leg to stand on to point a finger at the parks right now, because if this was their vision and this is what they wanted to see, Batuu, instead of doing Tatooine and bringing in the rest of the franchise where you clearly have money, they're going, well, we gave you Grogu.
Yeah, they're gonna come back and say, well, look, we gave you vision. It's not our fault that you guys don't know how to run a hotel.
Right, exactly. Who needs windows? Who needs windows?
They can't sell Star Wars there. That's the bottom line. They're one arm tied behind their back completely because the creativity they're allowed is just not there.
Here's what you do, Imagineers. You turn those giant gateways into Batuu, into the world between worlds motif. You know what it is. You go and you just ask Filoni what it is, or you ask the Ahsoka production design people what the world between worlds motif is. You put it at the gate. Everyone will be like, "Oh, why is it this thing?" And then it's just a fun park fact because Imagineering loves those things, and you just put whatever you want in there that day.
Creative freedom.
What we need, and what would show that Kathleen Kennedy is out, truly, the ideology of Kathleen Kennedy. Here's how simple it is: take Kylo Ren out of the meet and greet at Galaxy's Edge and put Darth Vader there.
Yes.
And when a fan says he doesn't belong here, you say, screw that. We don't care. And then I don't care if you have to get orange extension cords from Lowe's. You plug in speakers all over that frickin' expansion pad and you pump in John Williams. You pump that music in there and you make it feel like actual Star Wars. And then put the frickin' milk back in the blue and green milk. We don't need vegan Fruity Pebbles junk. If you want to compete with the butterbeer Give us an actual beverage and give us actual characters. It's enough. It's like a hippie utopia in there.
There's something that's in John Williams' music that activates your wallet and it starts shaking, and you're like, oh God, I have to spend money.
All right,
Yeah, but
it really does.
I have a theory. One of the things that's a problem is that who's going to replace Kathleen Kennedy now? I don't trust someone like Filoni because he's a moron, and I don't think he can manage a studio better than she
Well,
can.
he wouldn't know what to do because he only says yes.
Right. So what I would probably
Goldfish.
do, this is what I would do, and I'm dying to hear what anyone else on this panel would think. I would leave Dana on the exec management team, leave Alan on the exec management team, and I would drop Alan to also run Lucasfilm.
Oh no.
Oh, culture says nay.
No. I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm just saying that if I'm Iger, what I would probably do is I would move Dana or Alan into running Lucasfilm.
Like it would just be better if you had just a competent executive in there.
I'm not saying if they're competent or not, but I'm just saying that they're going to have to do something. So, we were conjecturing earlier in this video about who's going to replace her. It can't be Filoni. He doesn't have the mental aptitude, let alone experience to run a studio, right?
Well,
so they've got to be
my
more
question
executive
is-
minded. So they're going to have. So I think what's going to happen. Look. No one told me what I'm about to say, but I think if negotiations are starting now, that means they've already got.
August.
That means, okay, if negotiations are thinking about starting in August or September, whatever, that means that they've got someone lined up. And if I were Iger, I would probably drop Dana or Bergman down. I don't know if that's a good decision or a bad decision. I probably think it's a bad decision, but I can't think of anyone else that Iger, because he's a freaking narcissist, would put in charge of Lucasfilms. He wants somebody that he can control. So if I'm looking at the org chart, I'm looking to see who's on the exec committee. I'm going to grab one of those people that's on the exec committee, and I'm going to drop them down and let them let them stay on the exec committee.
Just find an exec who likes money. If you find an executive that likes money instead of their own personal agenda or care about legacy, if they care about making the studio money, there is a trail from here to Hong Kong that shows you what sells and what people like and how to make money. It's not that hard. Star Wars has been around. There's 50 years of data.
Yeah, but I'm giving you specific names. You're talking theoretical, X-Wing. I'm being real specific. I want to hear who else has any names as to what.
I got a thought.
Okay.
Not for running the studio, but somebody to come in and get the creative process going the way that it should go. In the role that Filoni's currently heading. Obviously, I'd prefer that Jon Favreau be in there, but I think that ship has sailed. What about Joe Johnston?
That might work.
I love it. He's a journeyman director, and he shows up and he fixes films. He's not a solid A+ every time, but he's a good A. B+.
I'm going to ask the question again. Who do you guys think is going to be president of Lucasfilm if it's not KK? I agree with you, Lauren. That's an awesome creative choice, but we're just spinning. Who do you guys think is going to be the new president of Lucasfilm? Let's take this convo all the way down, and let's just say, in our wildest dreams, let's dream this bitch is going to be this chick's going to be. I'm sorry about that. Probably going to have to beat me. This chick is going to be gone this year and the next 12 months, and someone else is coming in. Who's the next president?
Let culture talk.
It can't be anybody inside the building. Can't be anybody inside the organization.
No, because you're going to make a lot of enemies real fast.
But it needs to be somebody. It needs to be somebody who is very familiar and has been involved in Disney before. They need to go out, get the creative minds from Imagineering, some of the legendary people they let go, to come in and at least creatively redirect Lucasfilm. You have beautiful minds like Joe Rohde. You have beautiful minds, and that's a guy that can see every level of the concept here, right? You could bring in Tony Baxter to consult. Oh my gosh, he designed this thing. He designed a bunch of stuff like Star Tours and things like that. I mean,
what you're suggesting will never
by the way,
happen.
Tony Baxter is currently under a less than desired contract by Disney. We'll leave it there.
Yeah. I mean, you have legendary Imagineers who understand the creative process from soup to nuts. These are the people that can actually recover that and redirect it. But you can't use anybody that's in the company now because they're all corrupted. They only think about properties in one way. You need somebody who isn't creatively bankrupt. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter what division you're talking about now. Every single element of Disney's corrupted with lack of creativity and maybe some kind of an agenda. So
Lawrence Kasdan?
I agree with culture because of the fact that I'm wondering, and just to respond to what Mike stated, who I think should run Lucasfilm? Honestly, I don't know, but it's got to be somebody who's willing to go at least a little bit against Bob Iger each inch of the way, from less serious to great serious, to the point where they're willing to go ahead and go back to watch the original sequel trilogy, trilogies. They're willing to go back and watch the prequel trilogies, and they also want to go back and watch the Disney sequels to see where they went wrong. And also the fact that, in some tad bit, just like Jon Favreau, they're willing to go against the status quo, where they want to go ahead and put something out there kind of similar to what George Lucas has, something that us fans has wanted. Okay, someone who's not afraid to go against the grain or go against Bob Iger, but starting off with subtle ways, and then next, increase to the point where Bob Iger's ready to fire them.
Somebody who would bring in John Milius to do punch-ups on a script.
Yeah. Here's my list. Ed Catmull, who's retired, Alan Horn, who's retired, Tom Staggs, Kevin Mayer, and I'm trying to think of anybody else. They'll never bring John Lasseter in, but he'd be perfect. There are so many people right now that have a history here that already have a love of Star Wars. It is such a common knowledge that almost any of these great successful creatives or executives who have been in charge of creatives have a love of Star Wars. Yeah. It is fascinating to me that somehow we got someone with such an industry pedigree, with such an axe to grind, that she actually disliked Star Wars.
Yeah, look, it's on full display, Jonas. But let me just push back on one of your choices. They got rid of Staggs for a reason. He cost them billions of dollars on the NGE, which is why he's not currently the CEO of Disney.
Forgive me for the audience and for me. What's NGE?
Oh, the Next Generation Experiences is what eventually evolved into your My Disney Experience and the Magic Bands and all that other stuff. That project was slated under $1 billion, and we all know it's dang near $2 billion by the time it's finished. Yeah, sorry.
Well, let's talk about the timeline, and then we'll wrap up here.
Yeah.
If they're going to go into negotiations in August on her contract, and we assume that means that she'll be phased out. Probably she'll get a legacy position. She'll get all kinds of accolades. But there's got to be somebody in the wings to come in. But how fast do we believe this happens? I am leaning towards, I don't think this actually occurs until 2024. But what do you guys think? Do you think they move quickly, or do you think they sit on this and slowball it?
No, if they want to jump in the stock price and they need it before this Hulu thing.
When's the Hulu money got to show up?
January 2024.
Yep.
If they want to bump the stock price in order for this acquisition to be as desirable as possible for Disney to raise their advantages, they have to fix Lucasfilm. And then they have to decide whether or not the merging of Pixar raises the stock price as well. Pete Docter, look out.
Any other thoughts, guys?
Well, I mean, it's okay. I mean, Pete Docter's in a position he should never have been in. In fact, again, this all points back to a lot of very bad decisions by Iger to begin with. Every single one of these decisions that we're talking about now that trace back to even Kathleen Kennedy was all driven by Robert Iger. And I can't see a good choice inside the building. And I think you guys are 100% right with it's got to be sooner rather than later, because I don't see anybody accepting anything less. The money guys like Mike and and a few others here. You guys all realize that this is going to go sideways real fast, and they are forced to buy Hulu. And you know what? Comcast is going to hold them to it, because they're going to take that money and they're going to sink it into their theme parks.
The stock is still lower than when Chapek got fired.
I don't think they have an option.
No.
Just thinking about this. I mean, Mike asked such a fantastic question. I've listened to all of your thoughts. I can't think of anyone other than Jon Favreau that they can go out and get who could be the Feige. Now, not Feige Phase 4, not Feige Phase 5, but the first 3 phases, whoever was in charge of it, I don't care. I can't think of anybody who can help bring Star Wars together. I mean, the pedigree that you would have to have, the acumen you would have to have in terms of fixing this. They have to pay him anything.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you, but there's two problems with it. One is I think he's already been burned. I don't think his heart is in it anymore because he's been burned by Disney twice now. And
They're going to have to give him Bob Iger's yacht. They're going to have to
And-
say, listen, we don't care you get anything.
This has happened publicly. You know, if they had at least treated him well, but they've put a knife in his back twice. The other problem is I don't think that choice is acceptable to Iger. If your worry is that you're going to have to fend off Nelson Peltz and possibly Ike Perlmutter for another shot at the board next year, and they wanted to get away from that because he was kind of leaning in that direction too, I don't think Iger wants him there.
I think Iger is, well, you know, there are two different theories on this. Some people think that Disney will keep Iger around because he'll be the only man who can fix it. And other people think that Disney's about had enough of Iger at this point because he's not fixing it. This is getting worse. And people are beginning to lose confidence in Iger. The stock was just downgraded with they said that the company has cognitive dissonance is the reason for the downgrade in the stock. You don't get that if people believe your CEO is on the right track. So final thoughts, guys. What are we thinking in terms of, does anybody have any last, besides Jon Favreau, who is it? Who can they possibly? I've been sitting here thinking I can't come up with anybody in the industry who rises to the level necessary.
I think they're going to keep Kathleen. I think they're going to keep her for one more year. I think that they're going to do it. They would rather try to pitch selling something else off as opposed to actually fixing Star Wars to make up for the financial loss and get a bump in the stocks.
They got nothing to sell.
Yeah. That's the
Heck,
problem.
they got no one else to replace her. Maybe she sticks around just because they don't have anyone. I don't know. Anything is a possibility.
That's been my thought for a long time. But I think part of what got him into this mess is that Kathleen's position should really be as an executive. She should be facilitating all of these things instead of inserting herself into the creative process.
That's what she wants, though, because she's trying to prove that she always could have.
Right, I get that. But if you're trying to fix it, you need to separate those two things. There needs to be the executive who facilitates the getting of the things done, and there needs to be the creative lead that is the visionary for the story and the access point that would be the center of that bicycle wheel that you're talking about for the creative process, not all the stuff that surrounds it.
Is there anywhere for her to go in Lucasfilm to basically separate the two as a way for Lucasfilm to basically say, like, look, she's not part of the creative process anymore. Get her off of that.
Nothing she would accept.
I think she's either moving up or
My scary final thought is this. One of the most important ratios you run on financial statements is working capital, which is current assets minus current liabilities. Yeah, you know what? The financials that Jonah sent me when we were on the live stream, you do the math, and it's $207 million. That's their working capital. 10 years ago, it was in excess of $1.5 billion.
That's exactly right, and that's why when we watch these earnings reports, and nobody is reporting them. This is it.
$207 million is nothing for a company this size.
You've got to go to the Valiant Renegade channel. You've got to go to Midnight's Edge. You've got to go, to our stuff to find this out because the media is not reporting it. Nobody knows that Disney is at a precipice where they're in real trouble.
Well, they're hemorrhaging money.
10 years ago, their total liabilities were $10 billion. Right now, they're $103.3 billion as of April 2nd, 2023. And that's from the financials you sent me, which are right off of their balance sheet. Which are
they don't have next month's rent, dude.
No,
that's right. There's no emergency fund. And so here's the thing. Disney of 10 years ago would have never, ever, ever allowed that hotel to stay closed because it is a massive black eye. It is a huge PR issue. The Disney of today can't afford to keep it open. And the media doesn't understand that because we have so many of these stupid Ivy League 19-year-old, 21-year-old, 24-year-old reporters who they never learned how to actually report. They don't know anything about business. All they know is how to be activists and not activist investors. They just know how to hold a sign. And so nobody's telling the real news about this. Anyway, we're going to keep trying to do it. Kathleen Kennedy, if she leaves, if this is the real one, and I think it is, it's because the mouse is out of money. So, guys, real quick, go around, tell people where they can find you on this great, big, beautiful web out there. We'll start with Hughes, and then we'll go counterclockwise.
Views with Hughes, Jennifer News here on YouTube and on Rumble.
I'm Jonas J. Campbell from the Jonas J. Campbell channel, where I do a series called Everything Woke About, where I review all the children's content that Disney's been making and some other things. Also, I'm on The Pro Show as a producer, which is on Thursdays, 5 to 7, and maybe more if this thing keeps going how it's going. I'm also an investigator. I'm liking you better now. I'm also an investigative reporter at That Park Place, where I like to dig into random numbers and blow up a live stream. So,
and by the way, the folks at home would not believe the connections that you're forming. We can't talk about them right now. Floral.
Yeah.
I'm Floral. Well, actually, he's Floral from Under a Rock. And you can find us Wednesdays, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern. We don't talk necessarily news entertainment. We just try to be entertainment and do stupid things like YouTuber Showdown, where we pit YouTubers up against each other in those imaginary fights and watch them battle to the death.
Well, it's a great joy watching people discover you through this channel, other channels. So much talent. It's so awesome. Martin, where can people find you?
Well, they can find me at That Park Place, where I write things that don't really fit into a niche.
Hey, there's an itch for not a niche. Culture.
There you go.
Well, I'm at Culture Casino. I'm at Culture Casino. You can find me on all these places: Rumble, YouTube, Odyssey, Twitter, Minds, you name it. But it's always Culture Casino. Thanks for checking me out.
The hardest working man on YouTube. X-Wing.
I'm X-Wing from the channel X-Wing. Pretty easy to find me. Consider myself a source for normality in the Star Wars fan base. There's a lot of infighting, a lot of crazy stuff going on right now, but you can always find common sense opinions over on X-Wing.
And we love us some X-Wing. Mike, thank you so much for being here and sharing this with us today. Where can people find you, even though you are often behind the scenes?
Thanks for having me, Pro. Midnight's Edge After Dark, Midnight's Edge, and related channels. And thanks for having me. It's been an honor.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you are sort of the grand poobah who puts so many of these channels together. I mean, we all owe you a huge debt. Lauren, where can people find you?
I'm a writer on That Park Place. You can find me at Lauren Connor on Twitter or at Lauren Connor 9030 on YouTube, where I'm currently reading all of Heir to the Empire, if you're interested in the old EU novels.
Studying up so you can be ready for the movie that will have nothing to do with it.
Yep, I wanted to give people the real episode 7.
Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed content such as this. Do we know for sure that Kathleen Kennedy is gone? No, but it's different this time. It really, truly, we're not just saying that. We're not hoping you'll believe it. There's a money issue here that is serious that the mainstream media is not covering. We will continue to cover it. We're not going to let up. We're going to follow this. Disney is in for a highly destructive summer. The Little Mermaid comes out in a few days. They are hiding her race on posters in China, trying to scrap some money over there. Scrap that yuan, baby. Disney's in trouble. And we're going to keep following this, and we'll see if Kathleen Kennedy is one of those individuals who can't stick around. Please go to these fine gentlemen, find their stuff in the description below for this video. Click on it. Go check out their stuff. Subscribe today. And drop a comment down below. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.